Welcome in, everybody. It is Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which means it is time for another episode of Biscuits and SEC Live. I'm Hammer, a.k.a. Hank. That is Bossman, a.k.a. Alex. And we thank you all for joining us. This is our 8th show, 8 week in a row. We've been doing this every Wednesday night, so really appreciate y'all tuning in. We got a lot to get to this week after a very fun Week 12, the latest college football playoff rankings, some hot seat discussion, and then discussing the week ahead. So appreciate those of y'all tuning in and along for the ride. Before we hop into it, just in case some of y'all are not familiar with us, we're Biscuits and SEC. This is Biscuits and SEC Live, our weekly show. We also have a college football blog and newsletter in case you like to read the written word. As you can see below, a link to our newsletter. It comes out Mondays and Fridays during the season. So would appreciate y'all signing up for that. It is, of course, totally free. And we just keep you up to date with the latest news from the SEC and around college athletics, really. So without further ado, let's hop into it. Bossman, how you doing this week?
Doing good. Looking forward to the 8th show. It's been a lot of fun doing this show this season, and looking forward to another good one tonight. We got a ton to get to. It was a great Week 12. We got some interesting games here in Week 13 and some interesting hot seat talk to get to as well. So I'm excited to get into it.
Absolutely. Well, we keep running over. So in the interest of that, we try to keep this right about an hour. So I think we'll just hop right into it. Just a quick reminder right before we do, you can see below my name there. That is our handle for any social platform. So Instagram, Twitter, etc. If you'd like to go follow us on there, keep up with the show, keep up with the blog and everything that we do there. We would appreciate it. Same goes for our YouTube and everything like that. Feel free to like, subscribe. It helps us out a ton. So Week 12, as you can see below, I said when putting the graphics together, I just said Week 12 delivers because I thought it delivered with some good games. We had, Texas and Arkansas was pretty close. Florida, LSU, very competitive. South Carolina, Missouri, absolutely wild. And obviously the nightcap, Tennessee and Georgia down in Athens. So pretty exciting games across the board, at least in the conference play. There was certainly some cupcakes along the way as well for teams like A&M and Alabama. But let's just go ahead and get into these games from last week. We'll start, at least for now, chronologically and go to Fayetteville. That was the noon kick. Again, Texas always getting the noon kicks on the road or afternoon. They don't have to play night games, but I digress. Texas takes down Arkansas 20-10. What were your thoughts on this game? I know Arkansas covered the spread, so it's closer than Vegas thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this game would be fairly close. I think I said it last week that I thought that Arkansas was going to be able to stay in the game. Texas has had trouble pulling away from teams this season. We even can go back to the Mississippi State game earlier this year. Now we know Arch Manning was starting in that game, but it took them, 2.5 quarters to really start to get it going against Mississippi State, and Arkansas is a much better team than Mississippi State. So it's kind of the same old story for Texas this year. They're a great team. They've got a lot of really good players. Their roster is loaded, but they just can't seem to get it in high gear. They seem stuck in like 3rd or 4th gear. And that's good enough to beat most teams in the SEC. That's good enough to beat most teams around the country, especially with all the talent that they have on the roster. But you're still going to run into games like this. To me, I wrote this in our recaps, which is that this was another kind of welcome to the SEC game for Texas. And people have looked at their schedule and said Texas doesn't have a really tough schedule this year. They've got a couple of tough games with like a Georgia and a Texas A&M. But overall, like their schedule has been kind of a cakewalk for their first year in the SEC. However, these games are still being, welcome to the SEC type games because they got to play Georgia. They got to see how that went. Didn't go very well. But then you're also playing these middle of the pack, teams in the SEC, or what have been for the last decade or so. And you're still having to slog these games out. You're still having to, fight in a phone booth with a knife, and you're having trouble getting out of these games. You're doing enough to win, but welcome to the SEC. Every week in the SEC is tough. So that was the main thing that I took away from it. Arkansas also cannot get out of their way. I've been saying it all year. You watch their games, you look at their turnover margin. They should be in this game. And a lot of Arkansas fans were really frustrated with, again, the turnovers, or what, and missed field goals. Like, they just can't get out of their own way. And then finally, the last thing I'll say on it is Sam Pittman. We're going to get to it a little bit on the hot seat talk, but you saw things popping up on Twitter before the game even got started that you had on I-49 going into Fayetteville. You've got fans and boosters and folks with money who are buying billboards saying, "It's been a nice 5 years, Sam. Thanks for all the memories, but it's time for you to go." So kind of unfortunate to see that, frankly, I thought. But what were your takeaways from it?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I don't have a ton to add. We'll get to the Pittman conversation later. But just kind of what you said, Texas, to me, I'm very interested to see, what happens with them the rest of the way. Obviously, they this weekend host Kentucky, which again is another should be easy win. We'll see how they do in that game. But I think, you look at Texas, especially on the road, so far this season in conference play. Obviously, they had the Michigan game earlier this year where they handled business and looked very good. But they go on the road to Vanderbilt, win by 3, and then they go on the road to Fayetteville and win by 10. And they had 315 yards of total offense. They really couldn't get much going. They couldn't get the run game going. And Quinn Ewers kind of looked like he has all season, which is just good, but very, very far from great. There's definitely a big delta with him right now between, and he's looked great at times too, just not much this season. And for some reason, it's not consistent. And that's kind of how I feel about Texas right now, where the only time we've really seen them match up against, an elite team or a team that many consider to be elite was Georgia, and they got beat pretty bad. And the rest of their games have just been kind of what you said, like, all right, they win. Some of them very convincingly, some of them they struggle a lot with. So I think I think Texas is very inconsistent, but they're ranked number 3 in the college football playoff rankings. So everything is in front of Texas. You don't apologize for wins in the SEC. They got the dub by double digits on the road. So solid win for them, but certainly I know they will look back at the film and think there's a lot that needs to be cleaned up. And for the Arkansas side, like you said, it's turnovers to me, right? You lose a game by 10, you lose a turnover battle 2-0, especially when you're an underdog by whatever it was, 13 points. Like, that's not a recipe to win. And they kept it close, which is a credit to them, a credit to, their team. They do have a pretty solid team, but they just can't get out of their own way. So it's unfortunate.
Especially too when that turnover comes deep in your own territory. One of those turnovers was on the 35-yard line of Arkansas that gave Texas a short field. If you're going to give the number 3 team in the country a short field, you can expect to lose almost every time.
Yeah. I mean, it was very different the way the full game played out. I think Arkansas is better than Oklahoma, but similar to that, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, Arkansas's defense is playing well. They're holding Texas. Texas is not getting what they want. And then they get a turnover and it's in their it's like credit to Texas defense for forcing those turnovers. Absolutely. But it seems like Texas has done a good job this year of when the offense is struggling, getting some turnovers to help them out. So anyway, we can close the book on that one. I think the other games are a little bit more, impactful or important moving forward, especially the next one, Florida, 27, LSU, 16? That I don't even know what to say, really. I mean, what's going on with LSU? Because Florida was left for dead multiple times this year. I think in hindsight, Napier and his staff would never admit to it. Neither would the team. I think they threw the towel in against Texas, knowing without Lagway, we're starting a third stringer on the road. We don't have a chance, even if it was just subconsciously, because that defense got absolutely steamrolled by Texas and then turned around and gives up 17 points to LSU. So heck of an effort from Florida. What did you take away?
I think the main thing to me is something that you just touched on, right? It's okay. DJ Lagway doesn't play defense, right? But there are certain players that come along and have an effect on a team that can't necessarily be measured, and it's a psychological effect. If DJ Lagway is playing in that game, I don't think Florida's defense gives up 49 points to Texas. I just don't. I think when you have that guy on the other side and you know that you've got DJ Lagway who's back there, who we just saw play very well against Georgia in the first half. He's got Georgia on the ropes, and if he doesn't get hurt, Florida has a really, really good chance to win that game. And they turned Carson Beck over 3 times. Quinn Ewers, had been turning the ball over, a good amount during the season. He's definitely turnover prone. So I just think that the psychological effect of having DJ Lagway in the Texas game would have helped Florida. So I think we were probably a little bit too ready to put the spike and put the stake in Florida and just say that they're completely done. When that wasn't the case. And obviously we saw that this week. DJ Lagway in the game, we saw him, I think it was the second or the third drive, just absolutely march right down the field against that LSU secondary. And he looked like the absolute future. This kid's going to be a stud. You watch that game, you watch multiple different things that he did in that game. And by the way, the kid can run. He didn't even attempt a rush in this game. So that was a whole other thing, right? So LSU for these different weeks has had so much trouble against these quarterbacks who can run. And then in a game against Florida, a quarterback who should be able to run, but he's hampered by his injury, doesn't matter. All he has to do is throw all over him. So it's kind of the same old story for LSU. Their defense just cannot seem to figure it out. Blake Baker can't figure it out on defense right now. I still don't think he's got the personnel that he wants on defense out there. But really, I'm impressed with Florida. I got to say, like you said, they have been left for dead multiple times this season against Texas A&M. I thought Billy Napier was going to get fired after the Texas A&M game. I said it on a couple shows, whether it was ours or SEC After Dark. I thought he'd be done. And then I thought he would be, maybe after Texas. Now I knew that Scott Strickland had put that statement out already. But still, you're down whatever it was. I mean, there's the graphic on the screen, right, on ABC, and they're showing Scott Strickland next to the graphic of Billy Napier and then the record and the score and all this stuff. So, Florida, even with all of that, it just tells you a lot that these kids do believe in what Billy Napier is selling them. The locker room has never fallen apart. In many other places across the country, when you are playing and losing the way that Florida has over the course of this season, and you don't really have much to play for other than maybe, the Music City Bowl or whatever, right? The Popeyes Fried Chicken Bowl. Like, most teams fall apart. Most locker rooms fall apart. Most kids are already thinking about where they're going to go next, where they're going to transfer to. And credit to Billy Napier. These kids have stayed with it, and you get a big win against LSU in the Swamp, and the Swamp is rocking. And they're singing the Tom Petty song and making fun of Brian Kelly because he said he keeps doing this. He's got to stop doing it. But overall, I'm just impressed with Florida, and LSU just keeps trending downwards.
Yeah, I think before we wrap this up, I do want to mention this game, especially when you look at the box score, makes zero sense. I don't know if you saw this, right? But watching the game, it was brutal to watch because LSU's offense they could not figure it out. They were so inefficient, and Florida was extremely efficient on their side, and that's credit to Napier and Lagway. But LSU time of possession, over 41 minutes to Florida's 18. LSU ran 92 plays. Florida ran 43. And yet Florida scores 27 and LSU scores 16. LSU on 92 plays only gained 382 yards. Florida on their 43 gained 339. So just a painfully inefficient game offensively for LSU. And I think what happened, here you can talk about Brian Kelly or whatever you want. This to me comes back to what I was saying, and I think you probably were echoing this in the preseason of coming into the year, LSU was getting a lot of hype, especially coming out of Baton Rouge, right? Oh, this offensive line, Nussmeier, he's going to be good. And Nussmeier, it's a mixed bag. But I just kept coming back to, you just lost the Heisman Trophy winner. You lost 2 first-round wide receivers, and the defense was horrible last year, and they didn't get much help in the transfer portal. So, truthfully, I think after LSU, lost to USC, they kind of got things rolling. They beat Ole Miss at home. Things were trending very, very much upwards. And I think the schedule has just caught up to them. And they're actually, they were never a threat to do much. You can't lose that type of production off of a team and just expect them to somehow be better, right? Because they were 9-3 last year. So the idea that they were going to somehow lose the Heisman Trophy winner, 2 first-round receivers, and fix their defense because of a coordinator hire, I think was, a little bit of Kool-Aid drinking down there. And I think we're just seeing that play out here. Again, that doesn't say that Kelly and the staff have done a good job. I think there's a lot of evidence that they've fallen short this year, but I think this is sort of the old Denny Green, right? Like, they are who we thought they were now. And you go on the road against a team in Florida that, like you said, is still playing hard and is, better than their record shows. And LSU's just not that good, and they got beat. Simple as that.
Well, and this is what we talked about in the Texas-Arkansas game. Like, this is the SEC. Florida is not a pushover, especially when you've got DJ Lagway, and especially when you're in the swamp. It's not an easy game to win, and it's a rivalry game. Like, it's just life in the SEC. But LSU is expected to win these games, especially when you've beaten Florida. What was it, 5 or 6 straight times before this? And Florida's down. Florida's not bad, but Florida is not good either. And you're LSU, and you had all this hype coming into the season, like you just talked about. Last thing I'll say on it is it just seems like it's a different landmine every week for LSU. You kind of plug the dam, you put the flex seal on one hole, and then the other hole on the other side breaks open, right? You got running quarterback. You can't stop a running quarterback. You have issues in the passing game in week 1 against USC. USC throws the ball all over you. Miller Moss goes off.
Who's benched now, by the way.
Yeah, USC does not look good at all. No. So then you have turnovers. Garrett Nussmeier starts turning the ball over, and he can't stop turning the ball over. You can't make a field goal now. All of a sudden, over the last 3 to 4 weeks, you can't make a field goal. It's just one thing after the other for LSU that they just can't. They're plugging one hole, another one opens up. Plug one hole, another one opens up. It just seems like Brian Kelly and this staff this year are playing whack-a-mole. And I'm with you on the Blake Baker, expecting him to just, be the one to fix the LSU defense right away. Coaching matters a great deal, and we have seen coordinators come in and make those changes very quickly and really elevate a defense. I think he's done a decent job this year. The LSU
They're better. They are better on defense.
They're better this year than they were last year. They're not that good, but they're a little bit better. So he's making incremental improvements, but he still does not have the personnel in there that he wants. And I've been hammering this for the last couple of weeks, and I'll hammer it again. I think this offseason will say a lot in the recruiting trail and then in the portal as to what they do, because I think Blake Baker is going to be very active. Because if they're not, it's going to be bad again next year. So,
yeah, Jimmy's and Doughs, not the X's and O's, right? It's that old adage. So, a lot to think about for LSU fans, and hopefully a little bit of, hope and good vibes injected down in Gainesville, because that fan base and staff and team certainly needs it. So, good win for Florida. Next one on the docket: South Carolina takes down Mizzou 34-30. This game was also drunk. It was absolutely bananas coming down the stretch. I'm going to let you touch a little bit on Lenore Sellers. I know you've been hyping him up recently for obvious reasons. So I'm gonna take the Missouri side. I know South Carolina won the game. They look really, really good. I do want to give Mizzou a shout out though before I turn it over to you to talk about South Carolina, because I left them for dead. I thought South Carolina would cover this game with ease. Eli Drinkwitz had his team ready to play. They had a great plan. After getting beat, by A&M and Bama, I believe by a combined 65 points on the road, for them to go into Williams-Brice and have that game like right there for the taking and just come up slightly short is, in my opinion, a very, very good testament to that staff. just the coaching ability, the game plan that they had coming in, and just the buy-in that team still has. And I also want to shout out Brady Cook too, because I didn't think he would play. I think most people did not think he would play. He was doubtful on the injury report. Leading up to the game, everyone said he's legitimately a game time decision, and he didn't have an amazing game. Certainly, not numbers that are going to wow you, but that dude's a warrior. He's been battling for 3 years as a starter at Mizzou, and I just have a ton of respect for him showing up, playing injured, and nearly leading his team to a victory on the road. But ultimately, South Carolina got the job done because they're just the better team right now.
Yeah, South Carolina's on a roll. I mean, it's kind of funny. I was thinking about this earlier today, and I remember talking in week 1 on SEC After Dark about South Carolina, and a lot of us were saying, oh, no, this does not look good. ODU had them on the ropes in Willie B. Everybody remembers that. Or if you don't, I know we're in week 13 now here, but go back and watch those highlights. It did not look good in Willie B, and ODU really should have beaten South Carolina. And we were kind of leaving them for dead after that. It was like, oh no, Shane Beamer, this really could go sideways fast. And look where they are. They're looking 9-3, dead in the face, and they are rolling. And Lenora Sellers has played really well in the last 4 to 5 games. So to touch on Mizzou, though, I will say one is that 21-6, you're down 21-6 at halftime on the road, and you come back and you take the lead with 1:10 left. That takes a lot of moxie. That takes a lot of buy-in. Those kids never quit. So a lot of credit to Missouri there. And then in terms of South Carolina, I mean, same thing with them. You give up a 21-6 lead. You lose the lead with 1:10 left in the fourth. They didn't blink. Lenora Sellers comes right back down. They drive right down the field. It was like 6 plays, 70-something yards or 75 yards, whatever it was, and leads them to a victory. And the Willie B registered on the seismograph. It was so
when Rocket Sanders plowed into the end zone because nobody could take him down.
Touchdown.
Guys like the Incredible Hulk out there.
Yeah, golly, he's had a great second half of the season as well. Man, doesn't Arkansas wish they still had him?
Yeah,
but so Lenora Sellers, I've been super impressed with this kid ever since the A&M game, and South Carolina fans have been talking him up since the minute he stepped on campus. And it was a little shaky early on, but he showed flashes in different games, and so Chris Marler at Vern Dumquist on Twitter. Most college football fans will know who he is. He hosts the Locked On South Carolina podcast, as well as an Alabama show. He put up this graphic, and it's the tale of 2 seasons. And it shows the first 5 games versus the last 5 games for Lenora Sellers. So in his first 5 games, 57% completion percentage. Last 5, 65%. He's almost doubled his passing yardage. He had 138 passing yards per game in the first 5, 249 in the last 5. 6.5 yards per attempt, 9.5 yards per attempt now. He's in his last 5 games, he's 13 passing touchdowns to 2 interceptions, and he's put his sacks in half. So he's getting away from pressure. He's seeing coverages better. He's reading the defense better. He's doing all these things. He's really starting to come into his own. I've been very impressed with Lenora Sellers and what he's doing. And frankly, I'm going to call it right now. He's going to be a dark horse Heisman candidate going into 2025. And that may not even be a hot take anymore, because the way that he is playing is really off the charts right now. He's been super impressive. He looks like a 6'5" Johnny Manziel out there. He can run like that. He can avoid pressure like that. And now he's starting to really get a lot of confidence in the passing game. So it's been impressive to watch, and really, really good win for South Carolina here. If they're going to be taking the next step and getting to these 9-3, 8-4, and really trying to break through that ceiling here during the Lenora Sellers era, they have to win games like this, and they did on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before. I still think South Carolina, if he doesn't get hurt in that LSU game, I think they win that game. So really, they're a Lenora Sellers injury away from being right in the thick of the SEC and college football playoff race. I mean, Sellers this weekend, right? I talked about Missouri. gave their coaching staff credit. It was very clear what their plan was. It was stop the run, make Sellers beat you passing the ball. And, I'm sure Missouri is their coaching staff in particular is probably not going to admit this, but like at some point you just have to tip your cap to the kid because he goes 21 of 30, 351 yards and 5 touchdowns. And they held South Carolina to 109 yards rushing as a team. So the Missouri game plan worked to a T, and they just got beat. And at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do except put your hands up and go, man, good game, son. What can we do? So, yeah, I would agree. I would say kudos to both coaching staffs there. And South Carolina is rolling, like you said, staring 9-3 right in the face, which would be a monumental achievement for Beamer. I think I was looking actually at this when I was writing the recaps. They haven't won 9 games since I think it was 2013 in the Spurrier area. They had I believe 3 10-win seasons in a row under Spurrier. Have not come close to that since, and really didn't come close to that before Spurrier. So getting to 9 wins would be very impressive for South Carolina. 2 fan bases that are not very impressed with 9 wins. How about that transition? Georgia, Tennessee. So game in Athens, Georgia rises to the occasion, takes down Tennessee 31-17. Carson Beck got a little bit of his swagger back, and they kind of just put the clamps on Tennessee after getting down early. They really just put the clamps down on them. What did you think about the nightcap in Sanford? It was a great environment.
It was an awesome environment, and I loved Kirby talking it up at the end of the game or whatever. He did an interview with one of them. I think it was at the end of the game where a lot of people talk about all the environments across the SEC, and a lot of times Sanford Stadium gets kind of left in the middle or left near the end. And it was an awesome environment there in Sanford Stadium in Athens on Saturday night. This game went the exact opposite as what I thought it would. I thought Tennessee would cover. I expected Georgia to win. I think I picked them to win, but I just have seen this Tennessee secondary all year, and I've been saying it over and over again. It's obvious from the stats. It's obvious if you're watching the Vols. This is the best defense that Josh Heupel has had in his time at Tennessee, and they have looked really good all year. They've looked good up front. You got James Pierce over there, All-American type. He's going to be a 1st or 2nd round pick. And then on the back end, this is, the secondary has been a little shaky throughout the Josh Heupel years, but this year they've been really, really good. So especially with the Carson Beck struggles and, the struggles that they have had replacing Brock Bowers and not really finding that number one, not having Lab McConkey, that's all well documented. And then Carson Beck's struggles, throwing interceptions. So I thought that Tennessee would have a really good shot to at least turn Carson Beck over once or twice and stay in the game because of that. Instead, Carson Beck finally looked like the Heisman candidate that everybody thought he was going to be at the start of the year. He carved him up. It was pretty impressive to see. So especially, like you said, getting down early to Tennessee and then coming back, storming back, and then in the second half just taking control of the game. And I don't think Tennessee scored in the second half, if I remember right. I think it was 17-7 at halftime. And Tennessee doesn't score in the second half. So really good win for Georgia. Keeps them in the playoff hunt, keeps them in the SEC title hunt. They're still going to need a couple things to happen to get to the SEC title game, but keeps them in the hunt, and another good win. And for Tennessee, tough one to lose. It's on the road at night, so understandable to lose this game, but Tennessee wants to take that next step. So losing games like this and still looking kind of shaky. They've looked shaky much of the year. They're a lot like Texas, really good team, but they're having issues really getting out of fourth gear into 5th gear. And we'll see if that continues throughout the rest of the season. By the way, Tennessee's schedule is pretty easy the rest of the way, but they've got Vandy at the end of the year, and Vandy is not a pushover anymore. So watch out for that game.
That's right. The rivalry game that's really not a rivalry, but maybe this year it will be one if Vanderbilt can keep it close. Yeah, I don't have much to add on this. I think, Carson Beck was the difference in this game. I was actually looking back over this. I had predicted Tennessee. I think I predicted a 20-17 Georgia win. So Tennessee's offense did about what I expected. Nico played okay, as he has been. Didn't turn the ball over, but also just didn't really make any, game-changing plays, game-changing throws, sort of just took what the defense gave him. had a very okay game. And, Georgia played well against the Tennessee running game, although, of course, Dylan Sampson still got 100 yards because that guy's just an animal. But it was really just the Georgia offense. Beck finally looked comfortable. They got the tight ends involved. Delp had a nice touchdown. And they were just able to expose the Tennessee secondary. So good win for Georgia. I'm not surprised that they won. Backs against the wall. Kirby Smart team at home. For as vulnerable as they looked, this situation just seemed like it set up for them to get a win. I didn't see it being as decisive as it ultimately was, but it still felt like coming into it like Georgia's going to find a way here because they're Georgia and they win football games. So that will do it for our Week 12 recap. So as we said, delivered a lot of good games. Moving on to our next segment, before we hop into the Week 12 slate and storylines, I really think we want to just get into the college football playoff rankings, SEC title race, center this more on the college football playoff rankings, because I think the SEC title stuff is, again, the tiebreaker stuff is kind of crazy. Let's just wait to see how it plays out. But the college football playoff rankings, I had a few things I wanted to just touch on here. So first of all, just, so everybody's on the same page. Bama moves up from 10 to 7. Ole Miss from 11 to 9. Georgia goes from 12 to 10. Tennessee fell from 7 to 11 after the loss. Texas stayed put up at number 3. And A&M stays at 15. So those are really your teams that have a chance. South Carolina fans, it's not going to happen this year, especially with the, bottleneck of 2-loss SEC teams. A 3-loss team's not getting in. So A&M at 15, up to Texas at 3, and within that we've got the rest of the teams, sandwiched in there with 2 losses. Missouri still clinging to a ranking as well at 23, which is quite funny to me. But I'm curious your take on this. Obviously, we're Aggies, so this is probably biased, but A&M sitting there at 15. I'm interested to know, in your opinion, do you think they're being slighted? Like, they have 2 losses like the rest of these teams, that are ranked ahead of them, right? So Bama's got 2 losses. Ole Miss has 2 losses. Georgia has 2 losses. Tennessee has 2 losses. And they're all considerably, further ahead in the playoff ranking. And I'm just curious what you think about that. And A&M controls their own destiny, right? Win out, they're going to be in Atlanta and most likely in. But again, probably just some homer in me here as an Aggie, but I'm not quite sure what those teams have done that A&M has not.
Yeah, I'm with you. You can make an argument for anybody, any of these teams, pretty much to be above any of the other teams that have 2 losses, right? It's pretty much, to me, just like put them under a cup, shake them up, and then pull the cup and pick one out of the hat, because you can make an argument for any of these teams to be above any of the others. I'm a little surprised that A&M is at 15. We can go through it real quick here. Like, here's Tennessee's schedule, right? Like, they lost to Arkansas. They lost to Georgia. The Georgia loss is not a bad loss. Georgia's a really good team. Arkansas, kind of iffy. That's not a great loss there. Ole Miss, they've got, the big Georgia win. That was huge. Lost to LSU. LSU doesn't look great anymore. Kentucky is a bad loss. Then you can jump over here to A&M. A&M, who are their 2 losses to? Their 2 losses are to Notre Dame, who's a really good team, probably going to be a playoff team. Okay, they lost to NIU. That was a pretty bad loss. South Carolina is a really good team, and they got beat at night in Williams-Brice.
Yeah. I think just on this, I do want to clarify. I'm not even really saying, I don't think A&M is, as you mentioned, you can kind of just pull a name out of the hat here and pick up one of these teams, right? I don't think A&M necessarily should be ranked higher than any of the other teams that they're ranked behind. I think Kirby had echoed this in his post-game presser and even post-game comments, where they're like, hey, what statement did you make to the college football playoff committee tonight? And he goes, I don't know what they look for. He's like, I have no idea what the criteria is. And that's kind of what I'm saying here is, A&M lost to Notre Dame, who the committee has ranked inside the top 10. And then they lost to South Carolina, who the committee has ranked inside the top 20. Okay, so those are, quote unquote, quality losses. Now, the South Carolina game was out of hand, so it was more of a blowout than a close loss. So I get that. but point being, like, they have quality losses, I suppose. Maybe they don't have the big wins as the other teams, I guess. But they're 5-1, or excuse me, 5-1, 2 SEC games left, like 5-1 in the SEC. So they've played good competition. They beat LSU, they beat Florida in the swamp, that both Georgia and Tennessee struggled with. They beat Arkansas, that Tennessee lost to. So there's a lot of just like confusion from my perspective, and not just with A&M, but even, other teams across it. It's like, okay, Bama right now is at 7. What about their resumes better than Ole Miss? It's like, it's very nebulous to me. Like, what is the committee looking at here, and how are they determining who's better? And that even probably gets us into the conversation about, Indiana or Penn State or Texas. So I do want to bring them up as an SEC-centric podcast here. We don't have to get too much into Indiana and Penn State and compare resumes here, but we brought it up earlier. Texas, their resume is not good. I am of the opinion that if they lose in Kyle Field to A&M, they should not make the playoff. I don't know if the committee would do that because they're so highly ranked at number 3 right now, and it's Texas. But show me. Sorry, I pulled up the Aggie schedule, but show me here, right? If they lose to A&M, they will have 0 ranked wins, and the 2 ranked teams they would have played, Georgia and A&M, will have beat them. I really don't understand, especially if you are going to make the argument that I hear people making about Indiana, right? Well, they haven't played anybody, and if they lose to Ohio State, they should be out. Okay, I understand that, and I'm kind of on board with that, but we got to apply the same logic here. Just because Texas is in the SEC doesn't mean they played a hard schedule. I mean, they just didn't, right? Like, they've played 2 conference road games at Vanderbilt, at Arkansas, not the hardest environment. They've won by a combined 13 points. They had a home game against, the 1 ranked team they played so far, got beat by 15. And then they go to Kyle Field. Every other one of their games, these teams just aren't good.
Yeah, but their margin of victory against Colorado State, UTSA, and ULM is huge. So for that is going to put them over the edge.
Yeah, game control, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you in terms of what the committee's looking at. It's tough. The committee's trying to do the best they can, and it'll hopefully all get sorted out. We've got Indiana versus Ohio State this weekend. Huge game. If Indiana wins that game, 100% they should be in. The one thing that I will say about Indiana, yes, they haven't really played a difficult schedule thus far. And like, who is their best win against? Maybe like Illinois or somebody. I mean, I don't even know if they have a ranked win.
No, they don't have a ranked win. They haven't played anybody, I don't think, that's ranked.
So
maybe Michigan would be their best win, I guess. I don't know. Nebraska.
Yeah. But
it's not good.
One thing to note, though, and I saw this stat that somebody put up, and I thought it was fair, is Indiana's chances of getting to where they are now, 10-0, they had a 5% chance of getting to 10-0. And they're 10-0. They made it. They've won all of those games, and they've looked pretty impressive doing it. It's not like they're winning those games by a field goal. They're not winning those games, by a touchdown in the last minute. They're beating teams by 14. They're beating teams by 21. Like, they're smoking fools. So I think Indiana is where they should be at this point, frankly, and we'll get to find out this weekend in terms of Ohio State. I really wish that Oregon had lost last week so that we had total and complete chaos. That would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now it's all just kind of jumbled up there. And I'm with you on Alabama too. I think you could probably move Alabama down a couple spots. Like, is Ole Miss's loss to Kentucky worse than Alabama's loss to Vanderbilt? I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah. What I'm interested to see is, so this is obviously the first time we've had the 12-team playoff, right? So with the 14 playoff, again, there's never been, to my knowledge, any sort of like set criteria that the committee uses. But with 4 teams, there's a lot less teams have an argument, right? Like, hey, if you lost twice, whatever, you kind of knew who would at least be in, and they had to make some judgment calls sometimes. A&M getting left out in 2020, of course, a judgment call. Florida State last year getting left out. Like, they made some pretty tough calls. But I think with the 12-team playoff, what we're seeing here is there's just so many more teams in the fray that the committee is going to have to rank one over the other. And they're not really going to have a great reason for justifying it other than I think this team's better, or, this team has less, tallies in the loss column. And what I'm curious to see is on that last note, right, the losses, because if you look, and it's not just Indiana, it's Penn State, it's Ohio State, it's Texas, it's Oregon. A lot of these teams at the very, very top, their strength of schedule is not good. Makes sense, right? They're winning games against teams that aren't that good. Doesn't mean those teams aren't good. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying their strength of schedule is not good. I'm curious to see what impact this has moving forward on scheduling, because as an A&M fan, I'm looking at this and I'm going, all right, we took a loss to Notre Dame week 1. Why didn't we schedule Kent State? We'd be in much better position. What was the upside of scheduling Notre Dame? Okay, sure, we have another, big win, but the big wins don't matter. That's what the committee's saying right now, because as long as you just don't lose, which is fine. Again, if that's the criteria, that's fine. But once we start to figure out what the criteria is, I think you could see some adjustments on this stuff, because, again, whether it's, A&M, or I'm sure Clemson's saying the same thing, right? Why are we scheduling Georgia? What's the point of that? What's the upside there, right? Like any of these teams that schedule these big out-of-conference games, when they're looking at the rankings now and they see, oh, it doesn't seem like strength of schedule matters, because every team that, hasn't lost, there's only lost once, but has a strength of schedule in the 80s or the hundreds, well, they're still up there. So why am I going to go out of my way to schedule a big out-of-conference game and potentially take a loss when I could schedule 4 or 3, depending on what conference you're in, how many out-of-conference games you get? I could schedule 3 cupcakes and then just roll the dice in conference play. And if I come out of there with 1 loss, I'm in the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, or you do what Ole Miss did, and they scheduled this years ago, so I'm not throwing shade here, but schedule like a Wake Forest. You know what I mean? Like schedule an out-of-conference game that is so-so, right? But it's going to improve your strength of schedule, but it's also not going to be somebody like a Kennesaw State or something, right? Like schedule those middle-tier teams from the Big 12 or the ACC or what have you.
Yeah, or Cal. Oh, just kidding.
Cal, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Auburn.
Man. Yeah, that should be an easy win, without a doubt. Those tree huggers. Ooh, yeah. But anyway, but that would be the at least knowing what we know now, at least thus far with the criteria that we're seeing from the committee right now. That's what I would do. I would schedule out-of-conference games that are kind of in those mid-tiers of, say, Cal and the Wake Forests of the world, Virginia's of the world, like things of that nature. So, did we lose Hammer here? Well, he'll be back in a second, I'm sure. All right. Oh, told they might have lost power. Okay, it might be solo dolo for me for the rest of the show here. We'll see. Okay. Give me 1 second. We're going to move him. All right. We're back. We got the normal one. All right. I just got a text. Power's out with Hammer. All good. I will take it the rest of the way. All right. So in terms of the rest of this segment here, we can talk a little bit of the SEC title race. There's not a lot to touch on there. It's just kind of jumbled. It's really jumbled here at the top. There was a good article that came out from Saturday Blitz. You can check out, just Google Saturday Blitz and the SEC Championship tiebreaker scenarios, and you'll find it. But basically, you've got these 6 teams here at the top. You got the Longhorns, you got the Aggies, you got Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and Ole Miss. And Texas and A&M both control their destinies. If they win this weekend, which is big if, not saying they're going to win, we'll see. It's the SEC. We can touch on it in a little bit with the game that's coming up with the Aggies and the Tigers this weekend, because tough spot for A&M. A&M has had trouble in Jordan Hare over the years, and it's a night game. So that is not just a check. But if A&M and Texas win those games, it's going to come down to that game in College Station And the other teams in it, Georgia's going to need some help. Georgia, they've got an 8-2 overall record. They're 6-2 in the SEC. They've got the win over Tennessee, but the losses to Alabama and to Ole Miss are kind of holding them back right now. So they're going to need a few things to happen in order to make it. Tennessee, they've got the head-to-head win over Alabama, which keeps them in the mix here as well. The team that it seems like has the next easiest path to the SEC title game is Alabama. If between Texas and Texas A&M, whichever one of those lose. And then you've got Ole Miss kind of hanging in there as well, but those losses to Kentucky and to LSU are hurting them. So it's looking like most likely going to come down to a tiebreaker here as we get into the final couple weeks here to see how it all shakes out. But anyway, again, SaturdayBlitz.com. You can check out their breakdown. They've got a really good breakdown there in terms of what it's going to look like for the rest of the SEC as we get towards the SEC title and how it's going to shake out. So, all right. Next up, let's talk a little bit about the hot seat and where we started the year and where we are now. It looks a lot different. That's why I wanted to talk about this tonight, is because the hot seat at the start of the year and what we were looking at is much different from the hot seat that we're looking at right now. The hot seat that we're looking at right now is Sam Pittman, Brian Kelly, Mark Stoops, and Hugh Freeze. What it was at the start of the year was Billy Napier, Sam Pittman, Shane Beamer, and Clark Lee. I'm curious. I don't know if anybody's going to get fired this year. Sam Pittman will be right on that edge. We'll see what happens there. Arkansas fans seem like they're pretty sick of where we're at, and some of them have already tried to turn the page. As we saw on Twitter, we saw the billboards coming in on I-49 coming into Fayetteville on Saturday, seeing them saying it's been a great 5 years, Coach Pittman, but it's time to turn the page. If we're going to compete in the SEC, we need a better coach. So seeing that, it looks like maybe some rumblings on the Arkansas front that Sam Pittman may be gone as well. However, starting off the year, Billy Napier, everyone thought he was a dead man walking, including me. I thought he was done. Then you had Hammer maybe trying to come back. Sam Pittman as well. Oh, he is back. I'll pop him back in here. Whoops. Add him to the stage. Oh, he's back. Sort of. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sort of. I'm on a hotspot, so if it's not good, you might just have to boot me solo. After the power went out, the router's rebooting, so we'll see.
All good. We'll see what we got. I finished off the SEC title race. Now we're talking hot seat, and I kind of set the stage for it in terms of where we started the year and where we're at now. Sam Pittman being the one who has held over from the start of the year. But the start of the year, you had Billy Napier, you had Shane Beamer, you had Clark Lee. All three of those guys have coached their way off the hot seat. Billy Napier, he got the vote of confidence that probably gives him at least one more year going into 2025. And then Shane Beamer is the one I'm most impressed with. I thought it could go off the rails. I didn't think Shane Beamer was a dead man walking necessarily, but looking at their schedule and looking at what they had coming up, also right after that first week of ODU, which we touched on earlier in the show, I was pretty worried about Shane Beamer. I wasn't sure he was going to make it out of this year. Now it's looking like he's going to be just fine. And they may just get to 8. They're going to get to 8-4 most likely, and they really have a good shot to get to 9-3. I think they can beat Clemson. So it's been really interesting to see kind of how the hot seat, in most years, the hot seat, you got a couple coaches that come off, but a couple coaches that stay on. This year, you've really only had one. It's been Sam Pittman. And I thought Sam Pittman might have even gotten off after that Tennessee the Tennessee win. But the last couple of weeks, it seems like they've fallen back to earth.
Yeah, I think with Pittman, we'll just have to see what they can do the rest of the year, right? They're sitting here now at 5-5. They got to win this weekend, so they should go bowling. and then they play at Missouri, who frankly they've owned since Pittman got there. So if they finish 7-5, they're not firing the guy.
Yeah.
6-6, I don't know. I kind of think they won't at 6-6. But I guess it just depends on, what kind of money they want to throw out there and who they think they can get. I think that's the other aspect, right? Is, okay, you want to move on from Pittman. Who are you going to go out there and get? Because Arkansas is a tough job. A lot of coaches have been hired and fired there, and not a ton of them have won a lot of games. So if you really think there's somebody out there that you want and can get, maybe, but my gut tells me they're going to stand pat with Pittman one more year.
Yeah, I could see that as well. The other interesting, I don't think Hugh Freeze is going anywhere, right? It's been a tough year on the Plains, but I think that they'll give him one more year. Especially
they don't have the money. Not now.
Right. With the money they've invested in Hugh Freeze, I think they'll keep him. Mark Stoops, I don't know. He's not going to get fired this year for sure, but they're already asking him questions about if he's going to retire. The whole A&M thing last offseason, I think, left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths in Lexington. And I think it's going to start getting precarious here going into next year, especially, too, not to mention all of the different things that he said in these press conferences. He's just always complaining about something. He's always got some excuse. It's the referees. It's the fact that we don't have enough NIL money and we're not competing in the space. And they've given him a lot of money there.
Vandy's got more NIL money than him.
Yeah, Vandy's got ridiculous. And
yeah,
Kentucky has given him a lot of resources to compete. They built a new facility out there. I know, a couple years ago. It's a beautiful facility. I've seen it on YouTube. I've watched the videos about it. It looks awesome. So I think it's starting to sour a little bit there at Kentucky. And it's one of those things kind of like, hey, be careful what you wish for. We got to remember what Kentucky was before Mark Stoops. And they were not good. That program was not good. They were a perennial bottom dweller in the SEC. They'd had a couple, flash in the pan good years here and there, sometimes in the 70s. I mean, it had been a long time since Kentucky had really fielded a contender. But at the same time, even if he's a victim of his own success, at the end of the day, at this point, he's raised the level of Kentucky. And right now they're not meeting that standard. And with the kind of the off the field stuff and how he's trying to, push the Kentucky administration, I think going into 2025, there's going to be rumbling. The seat's starting to get a little hot there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm with you. I don't think Freeze is going anywhere, and I don't think Stoops is going to get fired, but he's definitely – it's just been a weird year, and he's going to need a bounce back next year based on how this year has gone. Anything else on hot seat, or do you want to get to week 13 because we are running a little long as normal?
Nope. Let's move on to week 13 here.
Cool. So week 13, for those Kentucky, Texas, Mizzou, Mississippi State fans out there, forgive us. We're not going to break down your games. Missouri at Mississippi State. Don't have a ton to say about this game. So sorry. And then Kentucky at Texas. Can lightning strike twice? Kentucky getting a big win on the road. I doubt it. If it does, we'll be here next week to break it down. But games that I think are a little bit more interesting. Ole Miss, number 9, Ole Miss at Florida. Just interested to see how Ole Miss is doing, coming off of a bye, off of the big Georgia win. They're obviously riding high, but backs are still against the wall. Tough environment on the road. And Florida, has a little bit of momentum here. So interested to see if Florida can keep it close. Interested to see what DJ Lagway can do against a very, very stout Ole Miss defense. I think Ole Miss, we'll give our picks away on the SEC After Dark show coming up here at 9 Eastern. But I don't think Ole Miss should have a ton of trouble here, but I do think it's an intriguing matchup.
Yeah, I do too. I forget what the spread is here on this game. I'll find it here. 9.5. So Ole Miss is favored by 9.5 points. I'm a little surprised Florida isn't favored by, or Ole Miss isn't favored by more. I guess it's probably because it's in the swamp. But it is nice for Ole Miss that they're going to go into the swamp. It's an 11 a.m. Central kick, noon Eastern kick. So that's helpful for Ole Miss. I think the two keys in this game, it comes down to one word. It's defense. Defense for Ole Miss. I like their chances against Florida. I really think this is one of the best defenses in the country. That front is scary for anybody to go up against. They've just got dudes all over the field. They've got depth. They've got guys, in the second level. You've got Sunter Perkins, who's just been a stud all year. So I expect them to be, especially if DJ Lagway is still having difficulty with his mobility because of his injury.
Yeah.
I expect Ole Miss to be able to get home pretty often in this game, and I expect them to be able to really be in DJ Lagway's face and affect his throwing. So, and then on the other side, it's Florida's defense. Florida's defense looked pretty good against LSU. Now, they still gave up some yards and different things like that, but at the end of the day, they held LSU to 16 points. Week before that, they got absolutely gashed by Texas. So which one are we going to see? Are we going to see the offense or the defense that played well like that against LSU, or are we going to see what we saw against Texas? I'm guessing it's probably going to be somewhere in between. But even if it's somewhere in between, this is a game then that Ole Miss can win by 21 points. So defense to me is the key for both teams, and we'll see which ones show up.
Yeah, I think so too. Alabama, number 7, Alabama goes to Oklahoma. Again, I don't have a ton to say on this game. I'm just interested. My opinion on this game is two things. First, if Alabama is officially, I don't even want to say back because that seems like they went somewhere and they really haven't. But if Alabama is a college football title, an SEC title contender, they should go into Norman and win very easily. Oklahoma is not a good football team. So interested to see just how Alabama handles this on the road, where they have struggled at times this year, right? Tennessee, Vanderbilt. So how do they look in a road environment? Are they, legitimately who we think they are? And then for Oklahoma, kind of how tough is the environment? Like, are people going to show up for this game? I'm interested to see because it's been a tough year and their stadium's been emptied out in a couple games. So I'm interested to see how just get a pulse of the fan base, right? Do they show out for this game? And I'm not talking, if they're getting blown out, does the stadium empty out? I'm talking like kickoff. Is it full?
Yeah, we'll see. That's a good question. I don't know what it's going to look like. I know Oklahoma fans are pretty disillusioned with how this year has gone. Even though we all knew, we talked about it at the start of the year, there was 2 teams in the conference who had easily the toughest schedules of anyone, and that was Florida and Oklahoma. But even with that, it has still gone sideways for Oklahoma, even more so than I think most Sooners fans expected it to, especially with the way that the whole Jackson Arnold situation has been handled, and Michael Hawkins coming in early in the year, and the offensive line, which has just been atrocious. So I think a key in this game comes down to that, the offensive line for Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's been playing a little bit better here in recent weeks. So I think that spread is a little big, frankly, especially with Alabama, right? Like Alabama lost to Tennessee. They lost to Vanderbilt. They struggled against South Carolina. I don't know that they can cover a 13.5-point spread against Oklahoma. And I think Oklahoma is a little bit scarier than people will give them credit for. They've got a bunch of losses this year, and they haven't looked good in a bunch of games. But they're still Oklahoma, and I think they're starting to play a little bit better. They should have had Missouri. They had the Tigers, and they had them beat, and they fumbled it away. But I think here it's going to be interesting to see if Alabama is able to exploit that Oklahoma offensive line, because Alabama, typically with the Alabama defense, we're used to seeing them, kind of up there with like a Georgia type, right? Like top 4 in the SEC every year in every statistical category. That's not necessarily who they are this year. And if you look at like sacks and tackles for loss, Alabama ranks in the middle or the back half of the conference in that. Oklahoma is in the back half of the conference in tackles for loss allowed and sacks. In fact, they're last in both of those categories. So if Jackson Arnold has a little bit of time, he can make you pay. And if he doesn't have a lot of time, then I expect Alabama to roll. So that's my key there is, what does that look like? Is Alabama able to exploit that offensive line? And if they are, I think they can cover the spread. If not, I think Oklahoma has a good shot for an upset here, especially at home.
Okay, all right, pretty different vibe. You're buying in a little bit more on Oklahoma, so I like it. A little bit, different than my perspective and probably different than most, but would be a very big feather in Brent Venables' cap. Would get them bowl eligible as well, which, based on the rest of their schedule, I believe they go to Baton Rouge next weekend. So, if they could get to 6 wins, get a win either on the road at LSU or at home against Bama, that would be big for them. So,
All I'm saying is don't count them out.
Yeah, fair enough. Next game, A&M at Auburn. Number 15 Aggies, 2.5-point favorites right now. I as an A&M fan, I think we've been saying it's a pretty scary spot, right? Going on the road, the Texas game looms large the next week. Going on the road at night to play Auburn. Hugh Freeze had a very tough year, but is kind of always good for, one Hail Mary performance a year. And if Auburn doesn't turn the ball over, that's kind of what I'm looking at in this game, right? Auburn can play with most teams talent-wise. They just have a tendency to shoot themselves in the foot. If they don't do that, this game should be very competitive. If they turn the ball over a bunch, then, you can see A&M getting a comfortable win. But Marcel Reed still has, some work to do. So sending him on the road into a hostile environment will be a pretty tough spot. And A&M, I'm sure you saw the Mike Elko slip up this week, which ultimate spin zone here. I'm actually saying that's a good thing, right? Because now everybody's saying we're looking ahead to, or the Aggies are looking ahead to Texas, but because he slipped up, we can't possibly be looking ahead to Texas because he slipped up. So now we have to actually focus on Auburn. So we'll see. What are your thoughts on this one?
It is not an easy spot for A&M, and Vegas has it at 2.5 for good reason. And Texas A&M, you look at their record, you look at the records. If you just look at this one on paper, you would think, okay, Texas A&M should win this one easy, right? Should win this one by 10. Maybe they win this one by 17, something like that. But over the course of the history of A&M and the SEC since 2012, this game has gone back and forth. And a lot of times it's been the road team actually that's been winning. However, A&M has struggled at times in Jordan Hare. So especially at night, with a night game, that's a little worrisome. The other thing here is Auburn has the third best rush defense in the conference. And we all know what A&M is going to try to do. A&M is going to try to establish the run with Marcel Reed. They're going to try to utilize that read option game, and they're going to try and establish the run with Amari Daniels and with E.J. Smith. So A&M is going to want to run the ball. Can they establish the run against this stout Arkansas rush defense? And if Arkansas is able to stop that, can Marcel Reed actually, continue to develop as a passer, which we've seen he can pass the ball. The kid's got the talent. He just needs to be consistent with it and be able to throw the ball 20 to 25 times a game and get a win. And right now he's not there. It doesn't seem like. So that's the big key to me. And then on the other side for A&M is Peyton Thorne, right? Peyton Thorne, he's mobile, and he's actually kind of coming close to being one of the all-time leaders for Auburn in passing touchdowns, which is absolutely wild.
Saw that.
To think about, but he is. He's if he gets a couple more touchdown passes, he's going to move into the top 3, I think.
That says more about Auburn than Peyton Thorne.
Continue. Yes, without a doubt. But A&M has struggled, right, against running quarterbacks. We saw that against Lenora Sellers, who was able to elude pressure, who was able to get the ball down the field. X factor in this game is former Texas A&M commit Cam Coleman. Cam Coleman had a really good game. He hasn't played, incredible as everybody thought he would this year and burst onto the scene. Part of that's been Auburn's offensive struggles. But you got 2 really good wide receivers for Auburn. You got Cam Coleman, and then you've got the transfer from Penn State. His name's escaping me right now. But Cam Coleman, I think, is
Lambert Smith.
Lambert Smith, yes. Smith.
Something Lambert Smith.
DeAndre Lambert Smith. So
yeah,
between those 2 guys, I'm interested to see how A&M does against them, because there have been a couple times this year where they've had wide receivers go off on them. So just watch out for those 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, tough spot for A&M. We'll see how they handle it. Last game on the slate, another night game for LSU. Don't tell Lane Kiffin, but they are hosting Vanderbilt at 7:45, the SEC Network game. Neither team ranked anymore. LSU obviously just fell out after 3 consecutive losses. Vanderbilt's kind of been in and out, but neither team ranked as it stands now. Man, this game to me, tough spot for LSU. They've lost 3 games in a row. They just go on the road to Florida, get beat. They come home, and that crowd is going to be antsy. If things do not go their way early and Diego Pavia is just taking the air out of the football, Vanderbilt's running the football, keeping the LSU offense on the sideline, that crowd is going to get testy. I do not like this spot for LSU. They should win this game. They are a better team than Vanderbilt, despite all their flaws. But Vanderbilt is well coached. They're not going to beat themselves. And I'm not totally sure I can say the same about LSU. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think there are 2 big things in this game. First of all is that LSU's defense is one of the worst in the SEC in terms of stopping the run. That does not bode well against a Vanderbilt team that wants to run the ball, and they're fairly balanced, right? They run the ball, play ball control, get a couple of slants, right? And then every once in a while, they're going to hit you over the top. So with that being said, I think on the opposite side, for LSU's offense, it is going to be imperative that they strike first, they strike quickly, and they get up quickly on Vanderbilt for exactly the reason that you talked about with that crowd. You want to be able – first of all, you want to get confidence very quickly. You want to get up on Vanderbilt early so that they have to play from behind. And then second of all, you want to have that crowd staying on your side. If you're tied or something at halftime, right, or you've played a sloppy first half and you go into the locker room and Vanderbilt is down by 3, right, and then you come out in the second half and you go 3 and out or something like that, you're going to start hearing boos. Boos will be raining down in Tiger Stadium. And this is not a spot where you want to be if you're LSU. So I think it's really imperative that LSU starts fast. LSU gets a quick couple of scores, goes up 10-0 or goes up 14-3, something like that, so that they get Vanderbilt playing from behind. Because otherwise, if you're not able to do that with that rushing defense that LSU has and with what Vanderbilt wants to do, you know exactly what's going to happen, and they're going to just drag you down into the mud with them and drag you down into that rock fight, and it's going to be a dogfight until the end. So I think it's imperative that LSU starts fast in this game.
Yeah, I agree. And we've seen now, several games for LSU. They do not want to get into a rock fight. They prefer a track meet. If they get into a rock fight, that so far they have not shown the ability to really win. I guess they did come out on top against Ole Miss, but in general, if it's a rock fight, down in the mud, I'm taking my chances with Pavia and Vandy before I would LSU. So, yeah, very interesting spot. Just to take it back to what we talked about earlier, hot seat stuff. The seat for Brian Kelly would get extremely hot if he lost to Vanderbilt at home. So, not a must win, but dang close for LSU. So, should be a fun one Saturday night. All right. We're a little bit over time, as usual. We're going to close out our show here with the same 2 segments we always do, the Muschamp Coach of the Week and our Biscuit of the Week. So first, the Muschamp Coach of the Week, for those of you who have not been tuning in, it is an homage to Will Muschamp. We miss him on the sidelines in the SEC. We loved him. He's just a character. He's passionate, has a ton of enthusiasm. Sometimes it, teeters on too much enthusiasm, but we loved it here. The guy just loved ball and loved to coach and was always super intense. So we had a couple nominees this week. Brian Kelly screaming at a player, of course, happens every week. So that was definitely in the running, but we decided to do a little bit more lighthearted winner this week. So without further ado, this week's Muschamp Coach of the Week goes to And in case you don't know exactly what you just watched, that's Billy Napier hitting the gritty after they beat LSU. So just love to see that, getting down with the guys after the game, after a big win. Been a tough season for Florida. I love to see G5 Billy, LinkedIn Billy, getting down with the team. He's still the Florida coach, and he will be next year. So good for Napier. I don't have any critiques on his dance moves. It was a little hard to see, other than you could tell he was at least doing the gritty. So for all I know, he is as talented as Justin Jefferson on the dance floor.
Yeah, and by the way, we're going to have to upgrade Billy Napier from LinkedIn Billy to LinkedIn Influencer Billy if he keeps winning here at Florida and he gets them over the hump.
Yeah,
so
LinkedIn
be on the
Premium.
lookout for that. Yeah, right. LinkedIn Premium. That's right. But yeah, great dance moves from Billy. Awesome. Good to see them get a win. I did see a different angle from that, and his dance moves were terrible. But I am not one to talk because I cannot do the gritty to save my life. I'm only good at the gritty after a couple drinks at a wedding. So congrats to Billy Napier. He needed no drinks. He just needed a win to get down on the gritty. So congrats to Billy Napier, his first win in the Muschamp Coach of the Week award. So another one to put in his trophy case.
Yep. He'll be very glad to receive that award, I have no doubt. To close it out, Biscuit of the Week. Bossman, take it away.
All right. So our biscuit of the week this week is actually one. So I'm a subscriber to Garden and Gun, the magazine. If you do not have Garden and Gun, it is a fantastic magazine on Southern culture, Southern food. It talks about everything in the SEC footprint and a little bit outside of it as well. Goes up into Virginia and things of that nature. But they had an awesome article this week, or in this month's issue, is for the October-November issue of Garden and Gun, from our friend John T. Edge. John T. Edge is a famed writer throughout the South, and he is also the host of the SEC Network show True South, which we absolutely love here at Biscuits and SEC. We've written many True South reviews, which are some of our most viewed articles on our website. I've got a lot more True South reviews to write. I'm a little bit behind. But they're actually in the middle of doing some True South episodes now. So you can typically watch those on Tuesdays. Make sure to go follow them at True South on Instagram and on Twitter. But this is the biscuit of the week here. Let me find it. There it is. So John T. Edge, he wrote this article. It is about Kinfolk, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. It's a restaurant that was recently opened. It's a diner with a kind of a modern take on what a diner is. And it's right there sitting on the Mississippi River in Memphis. And man, does that look freaking good.
Yeah.
You got the omelet and the grits there. And you've got a honey glazed biscuit with salt sprinkled on top is how John T described it. And then you can also see that fried chicken in the back, which is hot honey fried chicken. And then also you got their chicken biscuit there with egg on it. Looks absolutely fantastic. And you got their head chef, who's the man who opened it. His name is Cole Jeans. He's the co-owner and head chef there, doing a fantastic job, obviously. And I, for one, really want to have one of those. So next time I'm in Memphis, I'm going to have to stop by Kinfolk there, and you can go check them out. I think it's Kinfolk Restaurant, at Kinfolk Restaurant on Instagram. So give them a look, give them a follow, and check them out on Google. And next time you are in Memphis, make sure to check out Kinfolk.
Absolutely. That looked fantastic. So all our fans that are local to Memphis or find themselves passing through, be sure to stop in. I know it's not that far from Oxford, so y'all Ole Miss folks, just zip up the road about 45 minutes, pop over to Kinfolk and check it out. That will do it for us this week. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, we are Biscuits and SEC. This is our weekly live show at 7:30. We will be on with the SEC After Dark crew here in about 15 minutes at 9 Eastern. We'd love it if you would sign up for our newsletter. Link below. Comes out Mondays and Fridays during the season. Thank you again for tuning in. That will do it for Bossman. I am Hammer signing out. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.